Hi Tejas, welcome to the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jignesh. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for your time. Tejas, this was the most anticipated event for the market, and there were a lot of expectations. So we would love to hear your views and opinion on the today's budget.
Sure. So yes, this was a widely anticipated event, and I think it's kind of largely I feel the budget has delivered on the expectations. If I were to summarize the budget, this was a more supply side driven budget rather than a demand side focused budget, and definitely a non-populist budget, which was one of the worries for the market. अभी 5 बड़े स्टेट का इलेक्शन आने वाला है, तो थोड़ा सा मार्केट में फियर था कि बहुत ज्यादा पॉपुलिस्ट मेजर्स तो नहीं करेगा ये बजट, बट आई थिंक इस बजट में कोई भी पॉपुलिस्ट मेजर नहीं था. So that's a good thing. In my view, this is a pretty good budget. It's devoid of any negatives, and I think there are a lot of positives to take away from the budget that we can discuss them as we go along.
Right. Sir, some of the key highlights, sir, that you think were significant.
So I think three large takeaways that I have from the budget, or three breakups from the budget, right? The first and the most important was the government spending, right? Which is particularly the capex, the big growth in capex that they have shown, which is about 35%. It is slightly lower on the revised numbers, but still a pretty big number of about 7.5 lakh crores. So I think that is one of the biggest positives on the budget. The other was the focus on manufacturing, right? Outside of the budget, they've been doing a lot on the PLI scheme. There's a lot of spend on logistics and road infra and port investments and so forth. In fact, the budget also started. I mean, the FM started the budget by talking about the need for investment in infra and logistics, right? And then the third thing was the entire talk around the new age thing, right? So from digital currencies to the tax exemptions and the higher concession period for startups, the investments into investment funds and so on and so forth. So I think the government has largely demonstrated that they are aware of what the economy needs at the current point in time. There is a good focus on infra, which is the old economy, as well as digital, which is the new economy. There's a pretty good balancing act. The only negative or one thing missing from the budget which people would want to point out is that there was no demand boosting or consumption boosting measures in the budget. So typically there was a lot of expectations around maybe tinkering with the tax slabs or increasing the limits of the tax free income and so on and so forth. But none of that came through. So there were no direct consumption boosting measures in the budget, but I think that gets taken care of by indirectly spending more on infra and capex, and I think that will encourage private sector participation in capex cycle as well, which will boost employment and therefore higher income generation, and that is an indirect boost to consumption, right? So end of the day, I think for the government it's important to you balance your expenses and your income, and I think they've done a pretty tough job a pretty fair job in a tough environment of balancing both.
Right, sir. Anything that you were expecting and has not come through? Typically, we are hearing some amount of discussion on the healthcare or fertilizer or agriculture sectors.
So I think it's a subset of consumption, but if you see, there is a lot of negative commentary on the rural sector currently, right? And one would have expected that maybe there would have been increased spend on those rural measures through MNREGA and the other Pradhan Mantri schemes that we have, but we've seen that there is some amount of cut in those measures. So I think to that extent, that was slightly against expectations. Like I said, I don't think it is negative because there is an indirect way that they are trying to do this, and end of the day, they have to manage revenues and expenses. So there's only that much that they can do. But yeah, I mean, if you're really nitpicking, I think that little focus to boost the rural consumption was missing in the budget.
Right. Overall, markets have varied significantly with the expectation. Especially the way it has gone up yesterday. How do you see markets in medium term to long term? Do you see some consolidation happening, some profit taking happening, or you think, the run will still continue?
So 2-3 things, right? अगर आप typically एक recession से जब market की recovery देखते हैं तो normally उसके 2-3 phases होते हैं. पहला phase होता है बहुत sharp recovery. I think we've seen that over the last 1.5-2 years, right? We've had an across the board rally in sectors and we've had a very sharp recovery. उसके बाद typically market थोड़ा सा consolidate होता है. It goes a little sideways. You see individual stocks performing well rather than across the board sectors participating. थोड़ा सा consolidating stock pickers market हो जाता है. I think हम अभी उस phase में जा रहे हैं. We're probably entering a phase of a sideways consolidation in the market where you will see individual stocks and sectors doing well, and then eventually you will have at some point the euphoria coming in, and that isn't the and a bubble is formed. But I think we're still far away from it. So I think that's the first point. कि थोड़ा सा शायद कंसोलिडेशन या साइडवेज मूवमेंट हो सकता है मार्केट में गिवन हिस्टोरिकल मार्केट मूवमेंट्स अगर आप देखें रिसेशन के बाद. तो सेकंड, अगर आप वैल्यूएशन पर्सपेक्टिव से देखें तो एटलीस्ट फॉर फॉरेन इन्वेस्टर्स आई थिंक इंडिया premium to emerging markets is at a very high level, and that is why we are seeing a lot of selling by foreign investors, because relatively we are probably one of the most expensive markets in the region, or at least among the emerging markets. तो थोड़ा सा foreign investor का selling I think जो हमने देखा है वो चलेगा for some time, at least till the time that valuations kind of normalize. So that is the second pressure point on the market. On the other hand, I think the domestic fund flow is very, very strong. So I think that provides downside support. So while FI selling puts, pressure from the upward, I think the downside support comes from the domestic fund flows, and that is why I think the sideways consolidation is largely what will happen in the market from here on, at least for some time.
Right, sir. So, thank you so much for your time, sir. But one last question on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate the budget?
I think it's a 8 or a 9 on 0 to 10.
Yeah. And we hope that, all the expectations will be served by the state and the central government. So,
yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.